Hey guys, Savage Joy here with Real Progressives. Tonight I am joined by Mr. Michael Marcantonio from New York. I actually had a candidate I had on reach out to me to tell me the story of Michael. And basically, he is running for New York State Assembly, District 12, and he was unjustly kicked off the ballot. And you guys know how I am about unjust voting and things like that. So I'm glad Patrick reached out to me. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, Michael.
Thank you so much, Joy. And actually, Patrick is my campaign manager, so we're very lucky to have him. He's phenomenal. He ran a great race in the Congressional District 21, and now he's down state with me trying to fight this ridiculous lawsuit that's going on, and if we can persevere to win this seat. So thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. So you graduated law school, so that's kind of good in a situation like this. I actually interview a lot of candidates that went to law school. There's got to be something there. But it's so interesting that so basically you were kicked off the ballot. Now, when did you find out? I know there were rumors.
Let me explain what's going on for your viewers, because frankly, this story, I hope, is going to gain traction on the Real Progressives and alternative media and everywhere else, because it's so outrageous. It's so absurd. It is so unjust that you're going to say to yourself, that can't be the whole story. That can't be what is going on. But it is. I'm 31 years old. I'm running for the New York State Assembly. And about a month ago, I got a nice big fat lawsuit on my door. And that lawsuit says you are being sued by the Republican who you're running against, an 8-term establishment incumbent. He's suing me. This guy has never really had a real primary challenge. He's never really had a real opponent in a race. And he's suing me to kick me off the ballot because I'm the first candidate in his entire career, for the most part, that is actually having a real chance to unseat him. So what does he do instead of run an honest race against me? He sues me to kick me off the ballot for claiming that I don't meet the residency requirements under New York State. The residency requirements being that I have to be a resident of New York State for 5 years before running for the New York State Assembly. I have been a resident of New York State every single day of my entire life. Every day of my entire life, I've never not been a resident of New York. However, from 2012 to 2015, I went to law school. I went to law school in North Carolina at Duke University. And from 2012 to 2015, I was a law student there. But as we all know, merely going out of state for school does not sever your residency in your home state. Everyone understands that. If that were the case, every single person who goes to a state school out of state, just merely being there, they'd be able to pay in-state tuition. That's not the case. So I went down to Duke Law School, and here's the problem, though. If it was just that, no big deal. No big deal. I would still be a resident of New York for election purposes. But there's one other thing I did, Joy. One really bad thing that I did, according to the Republican Party in New York, that makes me not eligible to run for the state assembly. And that is that I voted. I voted down in North Carolina in 2012 and in 2014. Now, why did I vote in North Carolina? Some people ask. If you're a New Yorker, why'd you vote in North Carolina? 2 reasons. The first is that the United Supreme Court has held very clearly in a case called Sim v. the United States that college students have a fundamental right to vote either where they temporarily go to school or back in their home state. Recognizing that the burden of having to vote absentee ballot is significant. And given the 14th Amendment and the 26th Amendment of the United States Constitution, young people have a right to vote where they temporarily reside for college, even if that's not their home, that's not their typical residency. So I took advantage of that because I'm a college student. And the second reason is that Duke University, like many universities throughout the country, actively encourage their students, in-state and out-of-state, to register and participate in the political process. This is very important for young people, very important for college students, because college students want to participate in politics. They want to get involved. But unfortunately, there's a myriad of problems, a myriad of obstacles and hoops that we have to jump through from age 18 to 25, 18 to 30, during college and graduate school, that we have to jump through while we're in school in order to participate in the political process. So I voted down there. Now, all the other indicia of residency of New York were met by me. I never, ever changed my driver's license. I paid taxes in New York every single year. I maintained all of my stuff in New York. I spent half the year every year in New York, because when you add up all the days of law school, you're really only there for 6 months a year. I actually took a semester off. The first semester of my second year, I took off because my mom was sick and I lived at home on Long Island with my family. I only applied to New York law firms after law school. I only took the New York State Bar. All of these other things mean, under normal circumstances, that I would very much be a resident of New York, except I voted. I voted exercising my constitutional right. So last Friday, we went to court. And at court, the judge sided with the Republican and kicked me off the ballot solely for having voted in North Carolina, which is my constitutional right to do, and claims that by virtue of having voted in North Carolina as a student, I severed the 5-year residency requirement required to run for New York State Assembly, and I am no longer eligible until 2020, maybe even 2021. We don't actually know when that clock started ticking for my New York State residency again. This is an outrage. It is a travesty. And because of that, we are fighting it. We have appealed it, and we had our appellate court hearing today. Now, we don't get the decision until maybe tomorrow or the next day. But let me tell you why I'm appealing it, Joy. 2 reasons. First, it's just unjust that there should be only one candidate on the ballot this year. My opponent, the Republican. That's the first problem. But the second problem, and the more important problem, is if my opponent wins this lawsuit, if the appeal goes my opponent's way, that will mean every single New Yorker who goes out of state for school and registers to vote out of state, which is their constitutional right to participate in the political process, every one of those individuals would be barred upon graduating from college or graduate school from running for New York State office for 5 years upon graduating. That is absurd. It is discriminatory against young people, discriminatory against college students, graduate students, and it is part of the problem in New York State election law. So I'm so glad you had me on, and I hope your listeners follow my campaign, follow what I'm trying to do, and I hope this story spreads on the progressive networks, because we need to fight this, because traditional media is not covering it right now, and we need to start telling young people what's at stake.
Well, the interesting thing is when Patrick, who I see, hi Patrick, when he brought up your story to me and asked if I'd have you on, I figured it was the Dems doing this, because I typically get the stories of the Dems doing stuff like this. So this was interesting and different for me to deal with a Republican who's pulling this crap. But yeah, eight-time incumbent. That's pretty crazy. So,
and when the Republicans do it, they bring not just all their firepower, they bring an army of dirty tricks. I mean, it has been nonstop. In order for them to successfully sue me, they hired an opposition research firm and a private investigator to follow me around, okay? This is the type of stuff that they did. They followed me around. They have been ruthless, and we need a new breed of Democrats, of progressives, of young people to ascend to office to fight these people. Because I'm a fighter, And I'm going to bring everything I can to bear on winning this lawsuit and winning this race. But I'm not going to roll over. I am fighting this, and we, if needs be, will appeal it to the highest court in New York State. But right now, it is just as it stands. I am off the ballot for only voting, which was my constitutional right to do. As a matter of just simply common sense that defies logic, but as a matter of law, the courts are supposed to be the guarantors of our democracy, of our rights. And the most important right that any individual in the United States has is the right to participate in the political process, is the right to have your voice heard in our government. And derivative of that right is the right to run for office, is the right not only to cast your ballot, but it's to cast a vote in a legislature. And frankly, that's what I'm trying to do, to represent young people, to represent a new generation of politics, and they won't let me. They are too afraid of us, Joy. They are too afraid of Michael Marcantonio. They couldn't stand to see my name on the ballot, so this is what they're doing. And they found a pliant court to do it. And I hope the court, the appellate level court that we just saw today, has a different view on this issue. Because frankly, again, if they side with my opponent, it is going to be devastating for young people.
It will, absolutely. And, something else that was very interesting is you actually spoke to people at Duke, and I believe, was it USMC or?
UNC?
Right, UNC, about, basically trials of voting and elections and everything and things you have to go through to actually be able to vote. And now you find yourself here.
Exactly. That's an important point, Joy. So when I got into Duke Law, I got into Duke Law in 2012. 2012 was an election year. And as we recall, in 2008, Barack Obama won North Carolina very narrowly. He won largely on the strength of the African-American vote and on the young people, the college vote. And in response to that win in North Carolina, the Republicans in the state legislature from 2008 to when I got to school in 2012 employed the most voter suppressive tactics you have ever seen. They were scaring young people from registering to vote. They were threatening young people, saying, if you vote, you're going to lose your financial aid. That's a lie. That's illegal. But they did it anyway. They were also intimidating and threatening African Americans in North Carolina. And so on Duke's campus, Duke University is a signatory to the College Vote Project. The College Vote Project is a collection of universities throughout the United States. I think there's about over 90 universities that have pledged to use their resources and their time to enroll college students and graduate students at Duke to vote, to register to vote, and to vote. And also to enlist their students to partake in what's called voter protection, election protection. And as a law student, I was a 1L, I was a first-year law student, but still, I was in a fairly good position to help with that. And so at the time, in 2012, I was involved in outreach efforts to register voters on Duke's campus and to protect African Americans who were being systematically disenfranchised in Durham. And I was doing this because of the avarice of the Republicans down there, the vicious tactics to try to churn people of color and young people off the voter rolls. And then I come home to New York and I discover that it's not just the southern red states that are doing this. It is New York, a blue state, that has just as backwards election laws as down there. And again, I got to stress, this was my constitutional right, not only to partake in politics where you go to college, but to vote. And now because of that, solely on that basis, I am not going to be eligible, as it stands right now, to ascend to the state assembly in New York and represent my constituents in New York. But not only that, to represent a new generation of leaders. It's very sad, and that's why we're fighting it.
Absolutely. And there's so many things wrong with this, just not even just how undemocratic it is, but there are articles being written like you're not in the race anymore, things like that. So even if, democracy is on our side and it's overturned, it's still, the burden is on you to get back there and tell everyone, whoa, I'm back in. No, I'm still fighting. You're losing all this time canvassing and phone banking, everything like that. We have a general coming up. Yep. We have
Patrick is, no one's more upset than Patrick that I'm not knocking on doors right now. And that is a big part of running in local elections, is knocking on doors. We have been knocking on doors every day. We have been outworking my opponent every day. And we were gaining some real traction. And then this happens. And it was like an avalanche fell on us. It was shocking to me because, again, the sole issue was that I voted, which is a constitutionally protected right of a college student or graduate student. And so this takes money, time, and most importantly, momentum. We hope, however, that if we win this tomorrow or the next day, it will be a big pivot in the race. It will show the weakness and the fear of the Republicans and my opponent. And it will show, most importantly, the strength and perseverance of our campaign, and that we are fighters. And if we can win this, we can win the real battles facing New Yorkers today.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is actually Mark, my he has a really good point. There's voter suppression and candidate suppression. It's, absolutely. There's this guy who's an 8-term incumbent, but he's scared of a first time, millennial running.
Yep.
Obviously because he knows we do have the power to change some stuff.
Exactly.
And it's so bananas to watch things like this unfold. Now, I was being presumptuous. There was going to be one judge today, but you stated there are 5.
At the appellate level, yes.
Actually work in our favor, hopefully.
I hope so.
What were their idiosyncrasies as you were talking? Like, were they nodding their heads or...
So before I get to that, I just want to touch on the point you just made, that Mark just made about candidate suppression. This is very real and a huge problem. And it's not just from these election laws. It's also about what election laws don't regulate, and that's money in politics. So one of the biggest issues for young people, why we're not represented, they say to us, young people, they don't care. Young people, they're ambivalent. Young people have got to just participate in politics. And the politicians love to say this. They love to lecture us that if we only participated, we'd change the world. Except when we do, there's a nightmare of obstacles that we have to overcome. And the greatest obstacle is money in politics. Because young people, our generation, young people, they can't raise the amount of money. You have to raise, in order to run for the mere state assembly, they estimate you got to raise about $250,000 to be competitive. Imagine that. For a 31-year-old, imagine raising that much money, okay? And the only way you can do that in this system is if you're already rich or well-connected. That's the first obstacle that young people have to get through. Then the next one is if they can establish that they have money, which is viability. That's code for viability in this corrupt system that we have. Then you have to get the blessing of the local parties. And that's very difficult for a young person because they were just away at college. They say, where have you been? Where have you been the last 10 years? Well, I've been in college and graduate school trying to make something of myself. That's what you people told me I needed to do. You told me I needed to go to college. You told me I had to go to law school. You told me how to work really hard. That's what I did. And I come home and it's like, oh, who is this guy? And then after you get through that hurdle, then you have to deal with getting smeared for not really being a New Yorker because I went to law school out of state. You know, if I could do it over again, would have I not gone to Duke? I don't know. But that should never be a choice that young people have to make. Duke was the best law school I got into. Should I not have gone there to preserve my ability to run for office? This is discrimination against young people, and it's wrong. And so I really appreciate that question from Mark and that comment about candidate suppression, because that's the other side of the coin. There is voter suppression, but there's also candidate suppression, and they work hand in hand, because if you suppress good candidates, you suppress voters. So that is very important. But to your question about the judges today, listen, it's very hard to glean what these judges think. You know, from my perspective, this is an area of law that is just totally judge-made. Let me give you some background on the law. There's not this whole body of law out there that says, oh, yeah, you have to meet the 5-year residency requirement and all these little rules pertaining to what constitutes 5 years, what constitutes residency, what constitutes all of these factors. No, there's just simply in the New York Constitution one line, and it says you must meet the 5-year residency requirement to run for New York State Assembly. That's it. That's the whole law. And so in order to apply that to candidates, judges need to make this stuff up, right? They need to actually interpret that provision. How do they do it? Well, in 2012 and 2014, there was not a single judicial decision, not a single one, that suggested that if you vote out of state, that severs your 5-year residency requirement. So when I voted in 2012 and 2014, I was good. There was nothing to put me on notice that voting out of state could affect my ability to run for a state assembly. But when I graduated in 2015, the following year in 2016, a case was handed down by the highest court in New York called Glickman v. Laffin. Now, this case, Glickman v. Laffin, was not about a student. It was about a non-student. A guy, Glickman, moved from New York to D.C. for work. And in a connection with his job, he voted. He registered to vote down in D.C. Then he moved back to New York and tried to run for state senate. And the Court of Appeals in New York said, even though he maintained other indicia of residency in New York, it didn't matter. Because by virtue of voting down in D.C., he severed that 5-year residency. Now, we argued that our case was distinguishable because I'm a student. And that's a big distinction, right? There's not an epidemic of people moving out of the state of New York for work, registering in a different state, and then coming back to New York and trying to run for office. But there is a massive influx of college students going out of state to New York, voting where they go to school, and then coming back and potentially running for office. In fact, I'm not the first candidate, even this year, to be hit with this type of lawsuit. On Long Island, in the 7th Assembly District, another candidate also contended with this exact same lawsuit, but he got off because they didn't have proof that he had voted. So he got off on a technicality, which is great. But they had proof that I voted, and I was happy. And I'm not gonna lie about it. I voted as a law student, and so this is the second case this year that's dealing with this. And so there is going to be a massive problem in New York State when young people are trying to get involved in the political process like we've never seen before. Our generation is the most disadvantaged generation in the United States. We might be the first generation that have it worse than our parents had it. We are saddled with massive student debt. Our job prospects are worse than they've ever been. We're working longer hours for less pay. We have no access to credit. We can't buy homes. We can't invest. And you know what? To try to do something about it, we say, you know what? We're going to get involved in politics to change this situation. And you know what they do to us? They do what they're doing to me right now. It's an outrage.
It is, absolutely. Let's see what Mark says. I would suggest everyone who's friends to keep up with his campaign trail. Absolutely. Now, you said that they are going to give you an update possibly tomorrow.
They might be rendering a decision tomorrow or the next day.
Now, let's say it comes back not in your favor. Do you have any recourse at that point?
So it depends. And that's a great question, Joy. If they come back not in our favor and there's at least 2 dissents, because it's a 5-person panel, if there's at least 2 dissents, it's a decent chance, not a good chance, but an okay chance that the highest court in New York State, the Court of Appeals, can hear it. So we can appeal to the Court of Appeals, which is the highest court. But it's unlikely that they will take any case because, 1, they have the discretion to choose which cases they hear, and 2, they only take about 1% of all election law cases. And so it's not looking good if we lose at this level. By the same token, if we win at this level, we're in good shape. But it's very hard. It's a very hard thing because my opponent argued today that Glickman case I was just talking about should extend to students as well. It shouldn't just apply to non-students. It should apply to students as well. And I'm not quite sure, I hope, but I'm not quite sure the court appreciated how many students, 3 million students every year in the United States go out of state, their home state for school. And a significant percentage of those students vote where they go to college. I don't think they appreciate the fact that this could foreclose the future Theodore Roosevelt's, Franklin Roosevelt's, John F. Kennedy, all these people that I just named, they ran for office before they were 30 years old. Franklin Roosevelt ran for state senate when he was 27. Theodore Roosevelt ran for state assembly when he was 23. John F. Kennedy ran for Congress when he was young. So the fact is that there are a lot of people out there that get their political start in state office before they are 30, right when they're out of college. And if this rule is applied to us today, it could significantly foreclose the chance of the future leaders of New York, which is one of the most important states in the country. From my perspective, the most important state, but one of the most important states in the country. And if we can get into power in New York, if young people can get into power, we can do tremendous good, not just for New York, but for the whole country. And so that's why the stakes are so high in this race. And that's why they're so high in this lawsuit. And that's why I'm fighting so hard. And I might sound, very emphatic about this, but I feel like a real injustice has been done here. And, let me run. What are they so afraid of? What are they so afraid of? I'm a first-term candidate. I am 31. I have no political experience. I've never run for office. I'm running against an 8-term incumbent Republican assemblyman from a political dynasty in my area. And he doesn't want to face off against me in November. Instead, what he wants to do is disenfranchise me and kick me off the ballot. It's sad.
It is. It's extremely it sounds like he needs to grow some balls and just man up and realize, if I think I'm this great, I can take this dude on. But instead, he's trying to weasel his way out of having competition.
And that's a great point, Joy, because this guy, I don't know if your viewers are as familiar with New York, the inner workings of New York State politics, but the State Assembly of New York is like the House of Representatives of Congress. And if you're in the minority, which he is, there's 103 Democrats in the assembly, there's 41 Republicans. So my opponent is in the permanent minority of the chamber, which means he has absolutely no power. And the difference between Congress, the difference between the House of Representatives and the Assembly is the House of Representatives flips back and forth between Dems and Republicans all the time. But the Assembly has been controlled by Democrats for decades. And it's not looking like it's ever going to change back anytime soon. And so when we send this Republican, my opponent, up to Albany, we're sending a man who has no power, none, to get anything done. And he has no record of legislative achievements. And there are real problems in our district that I am fighting to fix. And so that's another reason why he's fighting for this lawsuit, is because he's got no record to run on. And he's got no ideas. And the things that he has voted for, he's got an abysmal voting record. One that is completely inconsistent with the needs of his constituents and the needs of New York. And so that is what, and I'm a loud talker. I'm a loud guy, and I was screaming from the highest mountaintop about this. And I was putting him really on the hot seat, and he didn't like that very much. So he decided to sue me. These are the dirty tricks that we have to deal with right now. And hopefully, if this story can catch fire, if we can get this story throughout the internet, if we can get the young people to get behind me, we can, and we win this case, we might be catapulted into the assembly through this. And I just hope that that's the case.
And it's crazy because you're not the only candidate I've interviewed who's been sued by their opponent. It's like, it's so crazy. And New York is extremely important. You're correct. But they have some of the most insane election laws. It's crazy. Like, you guys have to register 8 months in advance. Half the time people don't even know who the candidates are at that point. We had 3 million Bernie supporters who were independents who couldn't vote. We had 120,000 purged off the voter rolls. I mean, and they admitted to it. It's so crazy. And I mean, I'm in Pennsylvania. We have closed primaries as well. And it's all by design.
It's all by design. The entire electoral system is designed in New York and Pennsylvania to systematically undermine our participation in politics, not to empower us. And the things you just mentioned are very good examples, but they're certainly not exhaustive. The fact is that right now we have 2 primaries. Think about this. We had a primary on June 26th for Congress. And then we have another primary for the state offices in September. Now, how does that make any sense? It makes sense if you are trying to suppress voter turnout. If you're trying to make it harder for people to get involved in politics. They have to now take 2 days off to go vote instead of 1. And so that is another example. But just frankly, let's think about it for a second. What the heck? Why do we have a 5-year residency requirement in New York State? The idea that was that we would have, if in order to run for state office, you had to be close to the state, right? You couldn't be away from the state. You couldn't be a carpetbagger and move to the state. Isn't that a determination that the voters should make? Why are we foreclosing any potential applicants to the state office, to statewide offices, before the voters even have a choice? This is another means of candidate suppression, like Mark was saying. We should let the voters decide who is the best people to represent us, not have judges decide that.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if it was something like 1 year, it would make a little more sense. But 5 years, that seems so random. And we have more young people running than ever.
Yep.
So it's
a guy I volunteered with down at Duke in 2012. He is running for the exact same seat, but in Arizona right now. So the people that were involved in this at Duke and throughout the country, these were the future leaders, and they are the future leaders. And New York says, unlike Arizona, apparently, New York says, you know what? Sorry, we would prefer that the ballot go unopposed this year, and the incumbent is the only person on the ballot. instead of have a contested election. I mean, it's just, it makes my blood boil. But we're fighting it, Joy. We're doing our best. And, 5-year residency, it students, young people, because young people by their very nature are transient, right? We're not homeowners. We don't live in the same place. Our jobs are all over the place. We go away to school. We come back. During my 20s, I was living in school and then at home, and I had internships and then I lived at home. You rent and you're all over the place. That's the life of someone in their 20s. And that, unfortunately, when it's met against the 5-year residency requirement, really hurts you if you decide to go out of state for school. And so, again, this is an attack on young people. It's an attack on students. And you know what? I'm actually, I'm 31 years old, but frankly, I've actually, on the campaign trail, been doing a lot of meetings and a lot of events with even younger people, 16, 17, 18 high school students. These kids are brilliant. I'm so impressed by the next generation of kids. It's unbelievable. I just went to a March for Our Lives event, and these 16-year-olds were giving speeches about gun violence. And these were some of the best speeches I've ever heard in my life, and they were by 16-year-olds. They are worried about young people because we are the best educated generation in the entire country right now, and we are coming for politics. We are saying, enough with doing what our fathers and grandfathers did. We are going to go right into politics right now and try to shake things up and enact good legislation that protects us, because frankly, our parents and grandparents have not done a good job in protecting our generation. And that's why we are the most disadvantaged generation in our country. That's why we're saddled with massive student debt. That's why we had the Great Recession. That's why millennials have not yet recovered from the Great Recession. Every other generation has. We are still getting crushed by it. We're working longer hours for less pay. We're saddled with student debt. We can't get married. We can't have kids. We can't buy homes. We have no access to credit. We have massive credit card debt, massive student debt. It is a disaster out there for us. We're working multiple jobs, and it's just what we need is a government that is on our side.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have an idea. Not sure how you'd feel about this, but let's say worst case scenario, you don't get back on the ballot. Since that guy is going to be totally unopposed, why not be a write-in?
Because even if I won as a write-in, I would not be eligible. That's the problem.
But it would be a big FU to the people who are trying to stifle you.
That's true. Well, Patrick, if you're listening right now, let's look into that. But I suspect that in order in New York State, and here's another nice little chestnut of New York State election law. In order, I think, to even have a write-in, you'd have to petition for it already, and that point has lapsed. So gotcha. That is, I mean, let's look into it for sure, because it would be a big upset. But I mean, it's the fact that we even have to go through these type of things, right? Because the Republicans, they'll see that and they'll be laughing all the way up to Albany. Oh, yeah, he got a lot of write-ins, but guess what? I'm in power and you're not. That's the sad thing.
I mean, I wrote Bernie in 2016 because I was like, regardless of what happens, I'm staying true to myself and true to my conscience and stuff. And I'm very like, if I have a chance to say F you to corruption, I personally am going to take it. So, I mean, I think it would be cool just to be like, hey, guess what? People wrote us in because they would literally rather vote for me as an FU than not vote at all.
Absolutely.
So just an idea. What would you like to leave our viewers with? I definitely want you to read these comments. A lot of great comments, a lot of support. What would you want to leave our viewers with? So that they can take away if they want to share this stream and give people, especially in New York, a heads up to what they're doing to you. What do you want them to take away from this?
A couple of things. First, it's worse than it looks. The system is worse. And I know a lot of your viewers probably understand how corrupt and how backwards the election system is in our country, our political system. It's worse than that. It's more corrupt than you would think. It's more dysfunctional. And it's more entrenched by moneyed interests than we even know. And once you start running for office, you see it firsthand. That's point one. Point two, only we can fix this. We have to fight. We have to fix this. And if anything, we should leave this story about Michael Marcantonio's candidacy and say they're so afraid of us that they need to do these dirty tricks in order to get us off the ballot, in order to stifle us, but they will not stop us. They may throw a little sand in the gears, but this is not the last time. If we lose this if we lose this court case, this is not the last you're going to be seeing of Michael Marcantonio. I will be back, and I will be fighting. And I need every one of your viewers to fight with me. The corruption is so palpable once you get in and you start running. It sickens you. But there's only one way, and that's forward. When you're going through hell, we have to just keep going. The only solution to corruption is not to bury our heads in the sand and pretend like it doesn't exist. The only solution is to fight. And I am fighting with everything I have to make sure I am on the ballot. But if the judges don't rule in our favor, we need every one of your viewers' help to spread this message of what is going on. The more high profile we can make this case, the more name recognition I can get for this, the more chance that we will prevent the next person getting disenfranchised and getting kicked off the ballot. The more we can prevent the next time I run for office, them pulling these antics. And we should make my opponent, Andrew Rea, famous. We should make him famous for this. Everyone should know this man's name. This is what this man is doing. He doesn't want to face off against a 31-year-old. Instead, what he wants to do is deny me my right to run for office. Deny me the right of political participation, which is our birthright in New York and in the United States. And most importantly, I want your viewers to know that we must keep going. We cannot be dismayed by this. We cannot, because if we are, we lose. We need to look at what's going on in this case right now, and we need to say, I'm going to run, I'm going to run, I am going to run, because once you get in it, there's no looking back. It's kind of a funny thing. You know, I was very reticent to jump in. I was. But once I jumped in, I said, this is it. No looking back now. The only direction is forward. Now, what can we do right now? Spread this story. Everyone needs to hear about what's going on, because this is not about an assembly seat. You know, an assembly seat's important. A young person running for office is important. But the implications are greater. And the implications are this. Not only, if my opponent wins this suit, will young people not be able to run for office if they vote where they went to college or graduate school for 5 years, but every single college in America will now have to have an asterisk next to their voter outreach efforts to their students, which say, except if you live in New York and you may or may not want to run for office, beware that if you vote in Arizona or Pennsylvania or Durham or North Carolina or Florida or anywhere else, if you go back to New York, you might not be able to run for office. that is going to have a chilling effect on college participation. And so we need to fight this. This is a story not about me. It is about we. It is about young people being systematically undermined. And we must rise up. We are smarter than any generation. We are better educated than any generation. And we are more disadvantaged. And that is all the reason why we should be in power. We must not just write our names on the ballot. No offense, Joy, to that suggestion. And it's a good suggestion. But we can't just have a Pyrrhic victory in which we write our names on the ballot. We must have real power, because freedom in America really is political power. That's what it is. That's why corporations have so much power in America today. It's not because they are big and wealthy. It's because in this system which runs on money, they convert their wealth into political power. That is what they have. We must change that, in which individuals, voters, have political power. Young people have political power. And the only way we're going to do that is if we occupy the halls of Congress, of the Senate, of the House of Representatives, and we occupy the halls of every single state legislature in the country. We must do it. And that's what I'm trying to do, and I will not give up, Joy. So I thank your viewers so much. I really hope you can spread the word. Any interview, I will go on any interview, any news, anything to spread this message. So thank you so much, Joy. You were the first one, and I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. As always, I thank you guys so much for watching. Please follow Michael so you can stay apprised of what's, transpiring. I am on a medical hiatus right now with the show. I have 2 surgeries coming up, so I'm not doing too well health-wise. So I'm on a medical hiatus. However, this was kind of an urgent thing that I wanted to do anyway. So no other shows are scheduled as of now. I'm not leaving. Don't worry. I promise. But I'll be doing as much as I can. But thank you guys so much for watching. And again, thank you so much, Michael, for joining us, and best of luck.
Thank you, Joy. I appreciate it. And we will have good luck if we all get together and fight. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.